Well, welcome everybody to what is our second webinar in our webinar series. With this week having an awesome topic, talking about all things credit. As you mentioned, we are Prosper On, so we are changing the way that young adults think about money and their finances. We do it through things like this webinar, where we're bringing you engaging content about various topics across financial literacy, joined by some awesome experts like we have today. So I'm joined by two amazing guests, Ben and Nandi, who are here to provide their perspective and their insights on how to use credit as that critical stepping off point into building the financial future of your dreams. So without further ado, Nandi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Nandi Multaadli. I am the CEO of New Horizon Financial Network. New Horizon Financial Network is an advisory firm. It is geared towards fostering wellness and for business owners as well as individuals. We're a strategic advisory. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out after the call.
Fantastic. And then Ben, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Hello, everybody. I'm Ben. I'm a student at Boston University, but really I just spend all my spare time when I'm not in classes thinking, teaching, and yapping a lot on LinkedIn and a newsletter about personal finance and mainly helping people try and learn how to practice it themselves, because I think it is a really effective way to get a leg up. So that's what we're going to be covering today. I'm really excited to talk about credit because it is a really effective way to make money as you spend money, which I think is pretty cool.
Amazing. So getting into sort of what we're going to talk about today. So really the goal of today's webinar is to help you understand how to use credit to build the better financial future of your dreams. And this is a critical stepping off point, as I mentioned before. So we're going to start with a brief overview of the credit basics. So what is credit? What is this thing called a credit score that you hear about every time someone mentions credit? And then we're going to dive into credit cards as a valuable tool to help you build credit early on in your life. And then we're going to leave some time at the end for Q&A. So if you have questions, you have comments, things that you want us to discuss about credit, that's what our experts are here for. So we're happy to facilitate that conversation at the end. If you have questions or comments throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A feature to submit any questions, any comments, again, anything that you'd like us to cover in this webinar. Our goal is to provide you the most useful information possible. So if you have any input or any questions that can help guide this conversation, we're happy to hear it. So without further ado, let's jump into this concept of credit. So what is your credit score? Why should you even care about this thing? So let's use the example of you're going to buy a car. So you walk into the car dealership, you got this perfect car picked out, you negotiate with the salesman, you get him to come down to your number, and you have this agreement, you shake hands, and you're pumped about this deal. And all that's left is to cross your T's, dot your I's, and get the car loan to actually pay for this car. Then you go to apply for this car loan, and your bank says, sorry, you just don't have the credit score for us to offer you a loan. Or even worse, they might say, hey, you do have the credit score for us to offer you a loan, but because it's not the best, we're going to give you a high interest rate. And what that means is that when you borrow money, especially like with a car loan or a home loan down the road, they're going to charge you what they call an interest rate, which means not only do you have to pay them back the money that you borrow, you also have to pay them back extra for offering you the loan. So the higher this interest rate is, the more you have to pay this creditor for offering you the loan. So when you have a poor credit score that ultimately gets you a higher interest rate on that loan, it's really not a great thing. So it's something to keep in mind, but it's also something to consider. What even is this credit score thing that everybody mentions? It's an important part of your financial picture, but what even is it? So it can really impact your ability to borrow money from creditors, and it also impacts how much that money costs to borrow. But there's a lot of factors that actually impact that. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Ben to talk a little bit about what those factors are and how this impacts sort of your overall financial picture.
Thank you, Kyle. What I really want to emphasize today is that your credit score, as Kyle touched on, really measures your riskiness to lend to. It's what lenders use to evaluate if you are good for your money. And so your score, your credit score can range between 300 and 850, and a higher score is better. So if you have a score in the range of excellent from 720 to 850, lenders are going to see you as a very reliable person to lend to. And as a result, you're going to get lower interest rates on your loan. So for example, say Samson is going to look for a car. If he's got a bad credit score and he's trying to get a car loan, his interest rate is going to be a lot higher, meaning that same car, if it costs $10,000, if he has a super bad credit score, it's going to cost a lot more on top of that $10,000 than it would if he had an excellent credit score. That is why your credit score is super important to prioritize, because it's useful if you're getting a car loan, later down the line if you're getting a home loan. And then it's also evaluated for other things, like if you're going to rent an apartment. People will look at your credit score to see if you're a reliable person to rent to as well. So it's important to check your score regularly and to prioritize trying to keep your credit up. And there are simple ways to do this, which leads to the next slide, because you want to figure out not just what your credit score is, but also what factors impact your credit score. And there's 6 main things. Now, I'm not going to go super in depth on every single one of the categories, but I do want to focus on a few things that can help you keep your credit score up. The first is new credit. Now, it seems like a small piece of the puzzle here, but what's important to keep in mind is if you're trying to get a new credit card, whether it's your first one or your second or your third, don't apply to a ton of credit cards at the same time, because what this will do is it'll impact your credit score through what is called a hard inquiry. A hard inquiry is when somebody will check your credit score. This often happens when you're applying for a loan, say at the car dealership. Now, if you're getting a new credit card, there's ways to research and seek pre-approval for a card without actually applying. Pre-approval and applying are 2 different things. So if you're applying or if you're looking to get a new card, make sure that you don't apply to a bunch at the same time, because that's going to knock your credit score down. Do some research, seek pre-approval, and then when you figure out the one that you want, then apply, and apply to one at a time. The next thing I want to talk about is your length of your credit history. This one is going to be a bit tougher for our new credit card users, because when you're young, if you're 18 or 20, you're just getting started. And so unless you got some help out from your parents, you're probably going to have little to no credit history, but that's okay. What's important to note here is that when you're getting a second or a third credit card, don't close that first credit card, because your credit history is the average of your open credit accounts. What does that mean? It means if you have one credit card that you've had open for 2 years and then another credit card that you've had open for 1 year, your credit age is going to be 1 year. That's the average. But if you have one credit card that's been open for 5 years and then you open a new card and then you decide to close your first card, then your credit age will go shorter because you're closing that account that's been open for 5 years. So keep your credit cards open, manage them effectively, but don't close any cards. The final thing that I really want to focus on is your payment history, or actually it's the amount owed. Your payment history is important. Always pay off your card, but I'm going to touch more on that later. I want to focus on your amount owed, which is 30%. It factors into 30% of your credit score. And what I want to highlight here, sorry, I've had a bit of a bug, but is that the way your amount owed is calculated is used by figuring out how much you owe on your card versus what your credit limit is. For example, if you have a credit limit of $1,000 and you owe $300 on your card, then you have a 30% credit utilization. Now, the trick here is that you want to keep your credit utilization low. So if you have an $1,000 credit limit on your card, you don't want to have $950 spent on your card when your statement balance is recorded, because then the credit bureaus are going to see that you're using about 95% of your total credit limit, and they're going to say, well, this person is spending a lot of money on their card relative to their credit limit, and they see that as somebody who is more risky to lend to. So you want to keep your utilization low, ideally below 30%. Now, you may be thinking, I've got bills to pay. I've got groceries to spend on. How do I spend below $300 a month if my credit limit is $1,000? There is a trick that you can do. So your credit utilization is measured based on your statement balance. And actually, what you need to focus on is that your statement balance is only recorded once a month. So if you pay down your statement balance before the date that it is recorded, then you can avoid having a super high utilization percentage. Now, your statement balance is going to be different from your payment due date. There's a difference of about 20 days between the two, so they are not the same thing. So if you are looking to maximize your just regular spend on your credit card and get some rewards, but also avoid getting a super high utilization and having a low score, then figure out when your statement balance is, pay down your card ahead of time. And then when your statement balance is recorded, say you spend $950 on your card, you pay down your card by $850 ahead of time, and you record $100 on your statement balance, your utilization is only going to be 10% and you're set. Now, I know I said a lot there. So again, if you have any questions on what I just said, we're going to have a section for Q&A later. So go ahead and throw those questions in the chat because we want to answer them. But now I want to ask a poll question to everybody. So what are some ways that, or actually, no, this is a question for Nandi. I apologize. But Nandi, what are some ways that young adults can start to build credit and improve their credit score early on in life?
Thank you, Benjamin. So one way to start building credit, right? Getting a credit card. That's one way. So first, you want to research what card you want to apply for. Research the bank, research the fees, the rewards that would be associated with getting a credit card. Once you've done that research, then of course, apply to get the card. A couple of questions that they're going to ask you: employment history, some background information, and then once you apply, it can be instantly, or it can take a couple of days in order to receive that card. Can you ask the second question again?
Yeah, so there's a way to build credit, but then if you have a credit card, how can you sort of keep your score up, keep it high?
Sure. So some of the things that you can do is put bills that you know that will be reoccurring on your credit card. So that can be grocery bills or cell phone, right? Small expenses or even subscription, like a few subscriptions. Don't overdo it on your subscriptions, but some things that are going to be recurring that you know that this is how much overall I will be spending on a monthly basis on this credit card. Because then you can have a clear system that builds the credit, shows your utilization, right? You're using the card, utilization, using the card, and it's frequent enough that you're paying it off, where it shows that you are a reliable individual that can pay off that debt. Some of the cards that you can apply for is a student credit card as well as a joint credit card. Those are two methods or two credit cards for opening an account if you don't have any credit history. Usually they have no annual fees, and they are designed for limited credit history. On the joint credit card, that is just saying that your parent or a guardian is going to be liable for any debt or credit that you have that is outstanding. So you can apply for that. What it is, the benefit for that is whatever credit history that the person has had for a long period of time. So let's say if your mother or your father has had their credit card for 30 years, you can have that joint account, and that account will almost reflect the amount of time credit history that that person has had. So that builds the credit. So when you're looking for a mortgage, right, in the future for a home or a home purchase, you'll still have enough credit history, roughly, right, of that amount that the person that you're doing the joint account with, which is very beneficial. Again, take caution, because whatever history that person has, that's also going to be a reflection about what history you're going to have. Not to the fullest extent. Of course, there are different, your social security and that information is tied to it. So there are differentiators on that. But just understand that there is another advantage to opening that type of card as well.
Fantastic. And I think that really speaks to the power of credit cards as this tool for building credit, especially early on in life when you might not have a lot of other opportunities to build credit. You might not be ready to buy that house, or who knows, you might not even be ready to buy that car and take out that first car loan. So let's talk a little bit more about credit cards and how we can actually use these things to build out this financial picture that's really going to help us in the long term. So, how do these things even work? You have this little card, you apply for it, you get it, you got it in your hand. You go to the gas station or you go to the grocery store and you make your purchase, you swipe your card. Where does this money go? It's essentially a creditor lending you money over a short term, almost like a loan, with the promise that you're going to pay them back on time and in full. But Ben, why don't you talk a little bit more about how this process actually works?
Yeah. So when I'm always talking to people about credit cards, I always think back to the time I first got my credit card. And my parents didn't tell me a lot about personal finance, but they always warned me, pay your credit card off. And I was so freaked out because I had no idea how exactly to do that. And so I went to the banker and I asked them, hey, I've got this new credit card. I'm super responsible and cool, but how do I make sure this thing isn't a problem? And she was said, oh, you pay this off and you focus on this cycle and you look at this balance. And I said, and had no idea what she was talking about. So I'm going to try and do what that lady honestly tried so hard to do for me, but I struggled, let's be honest. So when you're looking at your credit card, it's going to report to you 3 different types of balances. Now, I want to specify what those are. Those are the statement balance, the minimum balance, and the current balance. In reverse order, the current balance is the total amount that you owe on your card at any given time. Total amount. Doesn't matter anything else. So if you have spent $300 on your card that you haven't paid off in the last 6 months, your current balance is going to say $300. Your minimum balance is the minimum amount that you have to pay on your card to avoid incurring any late fees. So if you refuse to pay off your minimum balance, you're going to get hit with late fees, which we'll touch more on later. And then also there's some other issues that you can run into. So that is what your minimum balance is, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to owe any interest on your card. That is where you look at the statement balance. Your statement balance is the total amount that you have spent in a statement period or about over the course of a month. So for instance, I'll provide an example. Say I spend $300 in the month of January. That is recorded on my statement recording date on February 1st. Now, I haven't paid off my card yet, so we'll say on February 7th, I've still spent probably another $100 in the month of February. So my current balance is going to be $300 for the month of January, plus the $100 that I've spent in February. So my current balance will be $400. But my statement balance is only going to record for the month of January. So my statement balance is going to be $300. My minimum balance, the minimum amount to avoid the late fees, is probably going to be something around like 25 to 40 bucks. But what I'm going to focus on and what I'm going to encourage all of you to focus on is that statement balance, okay? You always want to make sure you pay off your statement balance in full every month, because if you pay that off, then you don't got to worry about interest, you don't got to worry about late fees, and you can just enjoy the rewards and the benefits of your credit card. What do I mean when I say late fees? If you ignore paying off your credit card entirely, not recommended, but if it happens, then you will receive a late fee from your credit card lending company. And then on top of that, you can also sometimes get a sort of penalty interest rate where, since you don't pay off, your interest rate is going to raise higher. And then the issue with that, the scary part of that, is that with your balance outstanding, the amount that you owe is going to rise on a daily basis. Now, perhaps if it's a small amount, it's not going to rise a lot, but it'll grow quicker and quicker. And so you got to stay on top of that. It's something that you should really be aware of. The other type of fee that you should be aware of is international fees. If you're looking to go traveling, say South America or Europe, sometimes credit cards will charge you a fee for using your card in a different country. This is not all cards. It's really a case-by-case basis, and you can easily figure out if your card is one of those just by Googling Capital One, Venture One, international fees, ? And it'll say pretty clearly. They're not trying to hide that, but it's something that you should be aware of because you don't want to be spending extra when you're out vacationing. That would be lame. So final thing that I want to emphasize is just make sure you pay it off regularly. There are services, especially if you've got some of those big name brand credit cards from American Express or Capital One or Chase Bank, they'll often have auto payment services where you can just select pay off my statement balance every month and you don't got to worry about it. For me, my regional bank, I've got a credit card from there. They actually don't have that service. So if that service isn't going to work for you, set a reminder, make sure that you remember to pay off your statement balance in full every month. And then it's going to be a lot easier. Life is just going to be a lot easier that way. And you can focus on making your credit card your ally rather than something that you have to worry about. So with that, I want to ask a poll question to our audience. If you've used a credit card, what did you primarily use it for?
Awesome. So that poll question's live. Throw your answer in this designated space, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the different types of cards and how the way that you use them actually impacts the type of card that you might want.
So I'm seeing some responses here. I'm seeing small purchases. Fun fact, the very first purchase I made on my first credit card was 2 Taco Bell $1 bean burritos. I was so excited. And I'm proud of that.
Did you pay that off?
Yeah, I paid that off. Yeah, I paid. I managed. I managed.
Sweet.
I had the funds.
Sweet. All right. So, I think, again, we've talked a lot about, why getting a credit card is a really, really great thing to do to build credit early on. But once you've made this decision, hey, I think I want to get a credit card, there's also the question of what card is actually the best for you. And there's a lot of different types of cards out there. And we're going to try to simplify it by talking about 2 of the most common types. So we have low interest cards and rewards cards. So the first is low interest cards, and as the name implies, these are cards that carry lower interest rates. So I mentioned earlier in that car buying example that when you borrow money from a creditor, so in this case, the credit card company your credit card is serviced by, you're essentially asking to borrow money, and in return, you're going to pay them back. And then if you don't pay off that statement balance, like Ben mentioned, they're going to charge you interest for offering you that short-term loan. Now, the benefit of a low interest card is that the cost of borrowing that money is relatively low. They're typically either no interest or extremely low interest for a certain amount of time. So these cards are really great if you have these infrequent large purchases where you might have to carry a balance over from month to month. So maybe you can't pay off that statement balance every month. At least with a low interest card, you're not being charged as much interest, so you're not being penalized as much for carrying over that balance. Now, the caveat to this is that it's low frills. Your benefit is really that your interest rate is very low. So you might not be able to reap all the fun rewards that you hear about in all those new credit card commercials. Which brings me to the next type of card, which is rewards cards, which all those commercials that you see with, all these awesome travel miles and these points perks and cash back bonuses, things like that. Those are rewards cards. So in exchange for using your card, you actually get something back in return. These are really great for frequent small purchases. So the majority of you who answered our poll question said that you use your credit card for small purchases. For those of you who do that, this is a great type of card because you know that you're pretty confident that you're going to be able to pay off that statement balance from month to month. So now you actually get something in return for using that. The downside to this type of card, though, is that they come with high interest rates. So if you're not going to pay off that statement balance each month, it's going to cost you. But the benefit is that you kind of get something in return so that if you are using it for those small purchases, it's great. But if you're using this to, for big vacations or, to buy like big pieces of merchandise, that kind of thing, even if you're using it for an emergency, a big emergency comes up and you got to throw down that credit card to pay for it, it might not be the best because if you can't pay that off right away, that high interest rate is going to really hurt you. So it's really important to understand that you need to match the type of card that you are looking for to your lifestyle and your purchasing preferences. Which brings me to a question that I have for Nandi. What advice do you have for a young adult looking to open their first credit card?
Great. Thank you so much, Kyle. So I would say first understand that it is debt that you are accumulating, right? So it is when you have a credit card, you're coming into an agreement and saying, I agree to use your credit, right, up to a certain amount. That could be, as Benjamin said, $1,000. It could be 10,000 or more, right? And I agree that I will have access to this amount of money. And if I borrow from that money, then I will pay that back at this set date. if you don't pay that back, then you will accumulate interest. So understand that it is debt that you are using, money that you don't have, right? Or you're not willing to use your own cash for, but you're paying upfront with the bank's cash, right? In order to make your purchases. The reason why I emphasize that is because I want you all to understand that, yes, you are building credit history. Yes, you are showing your ability to pay back and trustworthiness. But at the same time, it is still debt that you are leveraging in that moment. And so it is a very serious thing, because when you are unable to pay off that debt, then it impacts you in various ways. Thinking about car loans, thinking about applying to a government job or a financial job or banking, right? Or thinking about the mortgage example. These all of these all of those avenues, from occupation to getting to the next step of your life, that all is going to be reflected on how much money you are going to be able to receive and how trustworthy you are based on your credit history. So the advice that I would give is be very cognizant about the amount of money that you are willing to borrow, and ensure that the money that you will be receiving or have lines up with the amount of money that you are borrowing. It is very important that you treat debt as a tool, but don't rely on debt, right, in order to advance you to wherever you want to go. Small purchases is not a problem. I know Taco Bell was mentioned. That's okay. That's fine. But it should be for something that is consistent and frequent, right, that you can manage. Or if they are bigger purchases, then again, you know that you will be able to pay it back after a certain amount. Rewards are great, right? Those cashback rewards and other rewards, like you mentioned travel, a lot of international students, that's a big thing for folks as well, where you can use credit card company to your advantage. You can also shop around for interest rates. Banks want to keep you, right? So if you call around and you say, hey, I would get an interest rate at this amount, what can you offer me? Sometimes they're willing to adjust that. It's not all the time, but they are willing to adjust that. Also, we were talking about credit utilization. So there's a credit limit. Let's say that $1,000. Let's say you've been very consistent with $1,000 in terms of your credit limit, using $1,000 for the past year or two. You can also go to the same bank that you have and say, I want to increase my credit limit from $1,000 to $2,000. That's something that you can also do. So it reduces the amount of credit utilization you have, right? Because you're increasing your limit, so the 30% is proportionate to that $2,000 increase. And that can help you when you're managing and you're looking to really see your, this shouldn't be the trial period, right? You should already know whether or not you can manage debt or not. But it can help you when you know how much access you will have for increased purchases, larger purchases, and where you can actually shift your money in an appropriate way. So 1, use the debt appropriately. 2, utilize, advocate for yourself, right? Advocate in terms of interest rates, and also the amount of the credit limit that you will have access to. Those are the 2 biggest things that I would say for you all.
And those are great points, because we've talked a lot about the benefits of credit and building credit and getting a credit card, but that there is kind of that warning that goes along with it too, of this can be a really powerful tool, but only if you use it effectively, you manage it effectively. So understanding that this isn't just free money that you're getting because you signed up for this card. There truly is consequences if you don't use this properly. So I love that sort of other side, highlighting the other side of the equation here, which brings us to kind of an open Q&A forum. And so I know we have a question in the chat here. Nandi, I know you might have to step away at some point, so if you have questions, put them in the chat. We're here to answer whatever questions you have. We have some questions here to keep the conversation going as well. But if there's anything that you want to know from our experts and from those of us here in attendance today, please use that Q&A feature to ask that question. But the one question that we have in the chat is, Is it advisable to get a new credit card or try to extend your credit limit every year?
I would say first understand why you want a new credit card. So let's say you have one credit card that gives you no rewards, right? It just is a credit card, student credit card that you've had. You're in the second year of your student academic career, and this is what you have. Then you can still have that card and apply for another card. Again, right? Warning, whenever you apply for a new credit card, your credit will be hit with an inquiry. When your credit is hit with an inquiry, that means that it will negatively affect your credit score. Okay. So we don't want to keep opening new cards, right? But if there is a purpose as to why you're opening that card, right? The new card potentially gives you more access to a lounge, right? Traveling, lounge access, or groceries, cash back, right? Or whatever reward is appealing to you, then that makes sense to get a new card, and you'll hold on to that card for, let's say, 5 years, right? So you want to be very intentional. I would say, firstly, try to extend your credit limit. The credit limit, if you can extend your credit limit, that's the best thing to do. And then when you've done your research and you know exactly why you're getting another card, then get that card. I wouldn't advise to get multiple cards, not like, keep it with one hand, one palm rule. You know what I mean? 5 fingers or less. Okay. You don't need that many credit cards. Again, every single time you apply for a credit card, it does negatively affect your credit score. It won't last for a long period of time, but it will have an impact. So be mindful of that.
Yeah, I
And
think
just to piggyback off of Nandi really quick, when you're applying for a card or applying for a loan, there's going to be a hard inquiry. It's part of the financial process. It's not something that you can avoid, but we just want to encourage that when you're receiving that hard inquiry, it's something that you've planned out, that you've researched, that, it's a worthy time to get a hard inquiry. You want to get a hard inquiry when you're sure that you're wanting to buy this car at this interest rate. You want to get a hard inquiry when you're sure that you want this credit card at this time. Try and plan it out, try and space them out instead of just applying willy-nilly. It's a part of your financial process, but make sure that it's something you're doing consciously.
Yeah, so I remember I got my first credit card in college, where my goal was, hey, I'm going to open this credit card. I'm going to start building credit by using it to purchase books and like little things here and there. And that was like the purpose for opening that first one. And to be honest, I haven't had a reason to get a new one until about actually now, where I'm actually in the process of planning a wedding, where my partner and I are saying, hey, we want to be able to pay. Yeah, we want to be able to pay for a lot of our wedding stuff, take advantage of the rewards. So, when we're actually, paying off our venue, or, booking our florist, or things like that, if we put it on a credit card that has really good rewards, we can actually get a lot back. And the trick there, though, is that we know that when we're buying those things, that we have the money saved up already to pay them off. So we're almost like hacking the system a little bit, in that we're going to get this really awesome rewards card. We're going to use it a lot, but we know we're going to pay it off. So we get to really reap the rewards of that. So I think those are excellent points, that, if you're going to open a credit card, do so very purposefully. Like, know exactly why you're opening that credit card, whether it's to build credit early on in life, or if it's like, hey, I know I'm in a place where I can get this really awesome rewards card, use it a ton, pay it off a ton, bank all these rewards, and really take full advantage of that. So
I
that's
also
awesome.
want to add to when you do have your credit card, right? Just as Benjamin said, let's say after you've opened a new card, you don't want it anymore. You can cut it up, sure, but what is the impact if you were to close it? You see? So it also will affect you. It can affect you negatively if you close that card because you no longer want it. And that card was the one that had the longest history. So you have to be very cognizant as to why you're getting a new card before just applying for one. Another thing too is check your credit history and your score, There are a couple of resources that you can go to, like MyFICO, Experian. Your own bank, for example, gives you free credit score overview. Sometimes there are purchases on your credit card that you're not aware of, and you can dispute with the credit card company. So also just be mindful of that. As Benjamin said, check your statement, because your statement can also tell you exactly what's going on with that. So just be mindful, again, what your credit score is and whether or not you can risk the inquiry on your credit.
Looks like we have another question in the chat here. So there's a lot of talk in the news around credit card debt. Is there an ideal usage percentage? So Ben, I think you might have mentioned this in one of your slides as well. So do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'll tackle this one. So yeah, there is a lot of news on credit card debt. The United States has about 1.2 trillion in outstanding debt. So pay off your credit cards, people. But there's, as far as if you're talking specifically about utilization, how much of your credit card limit should you be using, you're going to want to shoot for being under 30%. If you're really trying to maximize your score, you will actually get a higher score if you keep your utilization below 10%. That's considered ideal. But if you want to do that, it's easier to just pay your balance down ahead of time, as opposed to like really trying to focus on exactly how much you spend on your card. If you remember what I was saying earlier about, like, say you spend over that percentage, you can pay it down before your balance is recorded. So for me, for instance, I'll provide an example. I have a card, we'll say the limit is $1,000. It makes the math easy. And I don't focus exactly on making sure I'm below the utilization limit. What I focus on is I have a reminder about 3 to 4 days before my statement balance is recorded to say, hey, pay down your card. And so then I log into my account a few days before my statement balance is recorded, and I pay the majority of it down. If I've got $700 on my card, I'll pay down $650. And then I have a really low utilization performance or score, and my score gets higher because of that. So I would say as low as you can if you're paying it down ahead of time, but at a minimum, keep it below 30% is the standard.
Yeah, I think the next question in the chat kind of feeds off that too a little bit, in that, you've maxed out your credit score, or you're doing all the right things to really be opportunistic and maximize your credit score in that point in time, and you bring down your credit utilization. Will that affect your credit score, especially because you're using your credit card less often? So even like the frequency of how much you use your credit card, how does that impact sort of your overall credit picture?
I don't believe credit, and other experts correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think credit bureaus get a metric for your frequency of purchase. They get your recorded statement balance once a month, so they see your utilization. But that said, if you, let's see, if I maximize my credit score and bring down utilization, will that affect? I mean, that will improve your credit score. That will make it higher. One thing I wanted to note, that's what I was thinking of, is that you don't want keep your statement balance low, but you want it to be non-zero. If you have a zero statement balance, then that shows the credit bureaus that you're not using your card, so they don't think you're more responsible to lend to, because it just shows you're not using it at all. So you want that balance to be non-zero, but you want it to be low.
It really speaks like there's a sweet spot here. There's, you don't want to use your card too much, and I also think it's worth noting, when we say use your card too much, I think we go back to what Ben said about the statement balance. Like, it's ensuring that your statement balance isn't above that 30% threshold too often. Now, there might be some months where, like, look, you had a lot of purchases to make, you had to carry that balance over, and you might be over 30%. It might hit your credit score short term, but as soon as you pay that down below that 30% threshold, it'll ultimately start positively contributing to your credit score as well. So I think that's also worth noting as well, that when we say like usage and the frequency of usage, we really are kind of tying it back to that statement balance, and where that statement balance falls on that threshold, where it's more than zero, less than 10, or less than 30, or above that threshold, where it might start to hurt you a little bit in the short term until you pay it down. Great. So one other question that I have too is, what are some of the mistakes that first time card users make? Like, are there any mistakes that Nandi? I think this is something you have a great perspective on. Like, are there mistakes that first time card users can make that are pretty easy to avoid?
Thank you, Kyle. So I would say that a couple of big things is one, missing payments. This can lead to late fees and damaged credit scores. So as Benjamin said, set up reminders or automatic payments if your bank allows it. Definitely do that. Don't miss out on your payments. Okay. One time you'll say, "Oh, I only had $60 on my credit card, and now I'm being charged 20." An extra amount of money that you don't even have because you left that $60 on your statement month after month. So let's, pay. Okay. Don't miss the payments. Maxing out your credit limit. So aim to use less than 30%. We did talk about that, of your available credit, to maintain a healthy credit utilization ratio. That's very important. Ignoring those statements. Regularly review your statements. Sometimes there are errors, right? So make sure that you're tracking your spending, understanding what exactly is on your credit. Some apps that are out there just to see how many subscriptions you have. I know Capital One will show you what the recurring apps or subscriptions are, or the recurring payments on your credit card, and you can block those charges or not. So again, review your statements to see what's going on in there, and using your credit card for unnecessary payments. Only use your credit card or charge your card for things that you can afford to pay off in order to avoid accumulating debt. Okay, so in order to do that, educate yourself, understand how credit works. Great thing that you're here, right? And familiarizing yourself in terms of the conditions and what it actually is. Stay organized. Add it to your calendar. When is your statement date? When are you expecting to pay it off? Tracking your spending. Do you have a budget, right? Let's go back to the financial fundamentals. Make sure that you have a budget and understand where your monies are going, and use the alerts as much as possible. So avoid accumulating debt that is unnecessary all around.
Those are some fantastic pieces of advice. And, as we kind of wrap up here, a couple things. One, I'm going to launch a poll question right now just to, see how you guys heard about our webinar, and, hopefully you enjoyed this conversation and got a lot out of it. I want to thank our guests. So Ben and Nandi, thank you guys so much for joining us today, offering your incredible insights on what is really a truly cornerstone of personal finance, which is credit and building credit, especially early on in your life, as that stepping stone to a better financial future. As you can see here, we have a QR code on the screen. I also believe we're going to have a link in the chat to join our newsletter to get more information about all things that are going on here at Prosper On. So in addition to this webinar series, we also have our budget simulation, which gives you the opportunity to simulate a year's worth of budgeting and spending to see how you can craft a financial situation for yourself over a year in a simulated environment where you can do great things, you can make mistakes, you can learn from those mistakes. It's truly an awesome simulation. So that's an awesome thing that you can get access to by joining this newsletter. You can also get access to our webinar recordings, so things like today, all the wonderful questions that you guys asked and the information that you guys learned. You can watch this back. You can see our budgeting webinar from last month. You can view our content library, videos, modules, all this awesome information about personal finance that can help you build a better relationship with money and personal finance. So once again, I want to thank our guests. I want to thank you guys for attending. If you have any questions, please let us know. Once you're part of this community, you fill out the newsletter, you're interacting with us. We're always happy to help you get to wherever you want to be with your finances. In any way that we can educate you to help you get to where you want to be, that's what we're here for. So thank you guys so much. Again, thank you to our guests, and we'll see you next time.
And also, if you're